when you're a veteran team, like I think the Saints are, when you're talking about Derek Carr and Cam Jordan and Demario Davis and Alvin Kamara, these are veteran guys, and you miss the playoffs in a field of a wide open NFC, and there's 7 teams that make it, and you miss it for the second straight year. It's not shocking to me that Dennis Allen's back, but like, all right, we're gonna run it back again. Let's go. And if that's the case, like, okay, that I don't know if that's the best course for any team, but sounds like Dennis Allen's coming back. Their car's coming back, and it doesn't sound like Jordan and Davis and those guys need to retire anytime soon. Hell, they brought Jimmy Graham back this year.
Welcome into the NFL on Fox podcast presented by Verizon. I'm Dave Helman, and we have a loaded Thursday show for you. Would have been true anyway, but even as we record here, we have some extra news. That's the nature of this time of year. The divisional playoffs are on the horizon. The coaching carousel continues to turn. Today, we have 2 guests. We got our usual chat with Peter Schrager, NFL on Fox insider. Also got an all-pro on the show. Bears cornerback Jaylon Johnson joined me in studio to talk about his fantastic season, where things are going with his contract, the Chicago Bears, all that good stuff. Please, 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 as you will see in a second, keep track with everything that is going on in the NFL during this hectic time of year. Go find us on Spotify. Go download the show on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Go find our YouTube channel. It's the time of year where you don't want to miss anything, as evidenced by the special circumstances today. Literally, as we're wrapping the show, word comes down. We'll call it semi-news. The Dallas Cowboys are not making a head coaching change. They made it clear on Wednesday night they will be retaining head coach Mike McCarthy after that incredibly disappointing playoff loss to the Green Bay Packers on Sunday evening. Like I said, it's semi-news because Mike McCarthy is still under contract. He's got 1 year left on his deal. I guess the Cowboys didn't have to make an announcement about keeping a head coach, but it speaks to the depth of their failure that this is worth announcing, because there was a lot of speculation that losing 48-32 to the Packers might cost Mike McCarthy his job. Clearly, that's not the case. The Cowboys opting for continuity. I guess they're going to run it back, which, as I sit here digesting the news myself, I get the argument on each side. The Cowboys trail only the Kansas City Chiefs for regular season wins over the last 3 years. And yet I can hear Cowboy fans yelling at me right now. Who cares? 1 playoff win to show for it. 3 straight playoff appearances. Bounced unceremoniously as a home team in 2021. The only home team to lose on wildcard weekend back then. The 1 playoff win comes against a team with an 8-9 record, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bounced unceremoniously on Sunday. The only home team to lose a wild card game this year as well. So the playoff bona fides, embarrassing. I don't think that's a stretch. I don't think that's overly mean, but the continuity of keeping that coaching staff in place, clearly valuable to the Cowboys. They're going to give Mike McCarthy one last go at it and see how he does before we talk about an extension, would be my guess. My immediate thought here is just what this means for the rest of the coaching staff. Defensive coordinator Dan Quinn is already taking head coaching interviews. I believe he did a virtual interview with the Carolina Panthers this week. He has other ones lined up. He's threatened to take head coaching jobs in the past 2 cycles before this. The way his defense kind of finished this season makes you wonder how hot of a commodity he is. Will he be gone because he takes a head coaching job? Will he be gone because the Cowboys need something new after that performance against the Packers? I don't know. I'm curious to see what changes the Cowboys feel like they need to make. I've got to believe something comes of such a disheartening setback, we'll call it. It's not going to be Mike McCarthy, though. So we can get into more of this when it's not freshly breaking news. Cowboys have so much stuff to figure out, whether it's signing Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb for the long term, whether it's figuring out the mess that is Dak Prescott's contract situation. It's going to be a fascinating offseason. And if I had to guess, it's going to be a grumpy offseason as Cowboy fans cope with a team that just can't find a way to get it done, but is going to keep plugging away at least into 2024. We'll see how it goes. All right. Like I said, we can get more in depth there as we need to later. Fittingly enough, on a couple of fronts, this was such a controversial situation that it was worth talking about with Peter Schrager. And sure enough, it was out of date. We recorded this earlier on Wednesday. It's the second straight week, as I'm going to talk about with Peter. You'll see. You got to be careful recording things ahead of time during coaching search season. We didn't know McCarthy would be retained at the time. I still think some interesting stuff to talk about there, as we did with Peter, again, about Dan Quinn, about what happens in Dallas and what the mood is there. We also talked about the situation in Philadelphia with Nick Sirianni. So plenty of good stuff to get from this conversation with Peter. The cheat sheet presented by Honda. Also talked about staff changes in New Orleans, the offensive coordinator on his way out there. Lot to get to in this week's cheat sheet with Honda, with Peter Schrager, other than the Dallas Cowboys coaching situation. Go ahead and check that out.
Well, Peter, last week, you and I missed the craziest coaching day I can remember by like an hour, maybe. I think, we recorded, and then the Pete Carroll news comes, the Nick Saban news comes, there's Belichick thrown in there somewhere. So rather than learn my lesson about the perils of podcasting, I'm going to dive right back into it. We'll see how well it.
What are we here for? Of course. Let's speculate and go nuts and then have to pretend that we never said what we said 10 minutes ago. Let's go.
So as we record right now, nothing has happened with either of the jobs in the NFC East, and maybe nothing will happen. But I mean, for starters, I want to talk about whether that could happen, whether it should happen, and how we got here in the first place, that these two juggernaut teams, the Eagles and the Cowboys, over the last couple seasons are now potentially, at least, in transition.
There's a team in the NFC South currently still playing, and there's a team in the AFC South currently still playing, but no one from the NFC East, the conference that we dubbed the one with the two biggest heavyweights, are playing. It's crazy. Look, Sunday was a worst nightmare scenario for Dallas, where you have a great regular season, you win 16 straight home games going back to last year, you get the home playoff game like you needed, you get the 2C like you needed, you get an upstart team that's never been in a playoff game before, and they absolutely kick your ass on national television for 40 million Americans to watch, inside, outside, up and down the field. And it's hard to say after a third straight 12-win season that, okay, but next year, if you bring Mike McCarthy back, next year, things are going to end differently. Look, Jerry Jones is 81 years old. He's not getting any younger. I think he wants to see a Super Bowl championship. I think there's an urgency on his part. But here we are. You and I are recording on Wednesday, and status quo, Mike McCarthy still employed by the Dallas Cowboys.
I would love to be a fly on the wall in these meetings. And I remember this, weirdly, this is strangely normal for Dallas. Like when Mike McCarthy came in, they just kind of let Jason Garrett twist in the wind for almost a week, I think, before they finally made a new hire. So like it's not weird to me that a few days have gone by. But I would love to be a fly on the wall in these meetings. Like, is Mike McCarthy going to have to sell Jerry Jones that this really can be different? And is that something Jerry Jones should buy? I wrote about it for Fox Sports today, of like, man, this really felt like your last best chance. Not to say, obviously, crazy stuff can happen, but Dak is going to get more expensive. You got to pay Micah. You got to pay CD.
Lamb.
You're talking about handing out two $30+ million salary contracts. You're talking about, again, how much does the quarterback's deal cripple this? Is the quarterback worth extending?
Hey, and Dave, look at the rest of the NFC. This was the year, dude. This was the year. The NFC's like, what we're talking about, Tampa and Detroit and like these young upstart teams, and obviously Green Bay, but then like San Francisco's a power, but you're telling me you're the number 2 seed and all these other neophyte teams are in there, and you're the ones who have the playoff experience, and you guys go year after year. To not make it out of the wild card round is devastation. And I think Belichick's one route, Vrabel's another route. I think, I said maybe a little stupidly and naively last week that, in owner circles, and I like to think I operate a little bit in these and I kind of know what's inside the walls of these owners' meetings and these conversations because I've got some good sources. Belichick and Kraft have been 1 and 1A for years as far as league business goes and initiatives and sometimes the loudest loudest voices in the room. And I thought maybe there's honor amongst thieves, if you will, and that, it wouldn't be in Jerry Jones's best, maybe you don't take Belichick after that. And maybe it's, hey, we respect each other too much. I can go a different option. I'm not going to. And then a million people after I said that on air were like, are you crazy? Like all Jerry cares about is finally getting that ring and finally being able to say, he did it without Jimmy Johnson and Barry Switzer, that he was able to do it with a new crop. And if that's the case, then Belichick makes a lot of sense to me. It's not like Jerry's gonna suddenly be a wallflower and wilt in front of Belichick. I think he would want that opportunity, and Belichick knows what he's getting if he goes to Dallas with 24 different years of being a head coach and being at owners' meetings and interacting with league officials. But as we record this today, that job is not vacant. That job is currently owned by Mike McCarthy, who has another year left on his contract.
There's a couple things, and yeah, I'm recklessly speculating. It's whatever. If the Cowboys are going to draw it out all week, then I'm gonna take what I can get out of it. There's a couple things about Belichick that I find fascinating, and not in a great way. Number one, from like '04 onward, Belichick, he called every shot in New England. He was coach, personnel department, roster decisions. That's actually something the Cowboys do really well. Like the operation that they have with Will McClay, their draft process, is Belichick cool giving up the amount of control that he had in New England? Because I would say he's going to have to with a personality like Jerry Jones. And then the other thing is, and Mike McCarthy's been dealing with this for 4 years now, by the way, is Belichick cool working with an owner and a GM who's going to go on the radio on a Tuesday before his news conference or on a Friday before his news conference and say, yeah, this guy's up, this guy's down, this is what we're thinking? The news cycle in Dallas seems like it would drive Bill Belichick absolutely crazy.
Brother, how about after a loss on a Sunday in a gaggle of reporters and holding his own press conference every single game? That would drive Belichick crazy. But you know what? You're not employed by anybody. And if this is the opportunity that sings to you and you want to get to that record, you got to give a little bit also. You've got to maybe bend in your way. I asked a very respected NFL source, someone who runs another team, and this might be really insulting to folks in Philadelphia. I said, which job is actually more desirable if Sirianni does suffer that fate? He said, you look at the rosters right now, ownership group aside, GM aside, all that stuff aside, Dallas can draft. Dallas is deep as hell. Dallas finds these day 3 guys. Dallas has Dallas's roster is as good as any in the league. Phillies, a lot of veterans, a lot of bloated salaries, salary cap hell, some swings and misses in the late rounds, some guys who were taken in the first round that haven't necessarily flourished in the last few years. Really interesting to debate the two, and yet neither job is vacant at the moment.
And that's the other one that I wanted to talk about is obviously Nick Sirianni. And the drama in Philly is fantastic because the report, I respect the Philly beat so much for the way that they're going to try to get to the bottom of things, talking about, the report that Jalen Hurts is out on Sirianni and Jalen Hurts' endorsement of Sirianni after the loss to Tampa wasn't strong enough, which I'm just kind of like, what do you want the guy to do after his season just ended? Does his body language have to be fantastic when he's answering questions after an embarrassing loss? I don't know, but it's just staggering to think of how quickly this all fell apart. And when you think about the success that Philly's former coordinators are having, Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon in Arizona as well, I'm not going to advocate for a guy to get fired, but yeah, what answer is Nick Sirianni going to come up with about how he's going to get this thing back on the tracks if he does stay?
I coached in the Super Bowl last year, guys. I was in the Super Bowl last year, guys. Hurts did have a statement about Sirianni supporting him. I think AJ Brown was very vocal the week before when they asked him about it. He was like, "It's not on Brian Johnson. It's not on Nick. It's on the players. It's us." But yeah, that's all legit. Look, they fired or relocated or displaced a defensive coordinator when they were 10-1 this year. You want to talk about a pressure cooker? 10-1. They said, Sean Desai, you're not doing good enough. 10-1. So the pressure in Philly is unlike anywhere else right now because they look at their team as Super Bowl champions and they just got embarrassed on national TV, 32-9 to a Baker Mayfield led Buccaneers team.
Which, speaking of, just briefly, I like to take the victory laps when we can get them. I remember you had Jason Light on your podcast like way back in week 5, probably. And it looked for all the world like they were going to fade. You know, they went from 3-1 to 4-6. Like it was like, ooh, maybe we got too high on the Bucs too soon. And now they're in the divisional round. That is, I mean, we can doom and gloom about the disappointing teams in the league all we want, but I do think that is such a fun story.
They had an early, I think, week 4 bye, and they had just won a big game, and Baker was on game day, and I had Jason Light on my podcast, and it was like they didn't shy away from the cameras, and then they lost 5 of 6, and it was like, yep, there's your lesson. Don't crown yourselves in week 4. And then they turned it around and they lost a bad one against the Saints a couple of weeks ago, and then they beat the Panthers, and then they had a really great win against the Eagles. They're big underdogs in Detroit. That's going to be a really hostile crowd. I kind of like Detroit in that game. I would say it like it is. I think Detroit's going to take care of business in the divisional round, but like this season in itself has already been a success in Tampa, where I think nobody had them going to the final 8.
I don't know how many people picked them to win the NFC South.
Nobody
win a playoff game. Yeah. I mean, they were at the best case scenario, they were a sacrificial lamb, you know. Okay, cool. You host a wild card game that you'll lose to Philly or Dallas. Oops.
Yeah. No, I remember they did joint practices with the Jets this year up in New York before their preseason game. And then the Jets, I want to say Saleh canceled the second day of practice. It was like, I think we got, and like, I remember the fact that Tampa was up in New Jersey for like 6 days. I'm like, oh, like it just doesn't feel like this is a team that's like Super Bowl bound by any means. Like it just doesn't, it wasn't perfect. And Baker was battling Kyle Trask, and we had so many questions about Mike Evans' contract. And that just goes to show you don't know what's going on in August or early September until these guys take the field and they start believing and they start playing. Because I think if you were to ask me, give me coaches on the hot seat a couple months ago, I would have said Todd Bowles. Absolutely not right now. That guy is the real deal.
Todd Bowles would have been the favorite to be the first coach fired in a lot of sports books or wherever you want to talk about it, which I remember we talked about this as well. Like, I mean, clearly Baker Mayfield has earned a larger contract than the one that he signed to get to Tampa Bay, but I'm going to be so curious to see how the Bucs spin this forward. I mean, like what is a number that works for Baker? I think it's so fitting that him and Jared Goff are playing this game against each other. Like, obviously, 2 former number 1 picks that resuscitated their careers, but also I think the contract is a big part of that as well. Like, it's easier to put a good team around Jared Goff at the number he was. How high of a number do you have to get to with Baker Mayfield where you're not disrespecting him, but it's like, hey, man, I don't know if you can be the centerpiece of this roster either.
So Baker makes $4 million this year. So he wins. I think he makes $250,000 every win in the playoffs, which is awesome for him. The question is, like, if Baker's a free agent, all right, are we talking 15, 20, 25? Does Baker get 30 on the market? Like, it is wide open, and that's going to leave that to his agent and him. But the more he plays and the more he wins, the better his number goes up.
Let's stick it in the NFC South for a minute, just since we're already there. I did, it's noteworthy the New Orleans Saints parted ways with long time OC Pete Carmichael, as well as some other assistants. I think the thing that stands out for me here, well, first of all, as an NFL insider, you want to take a bet with me of, what are the odds that Pete Carmichael resurfaces in Denver, Colorado?
Yeah, there's him will be with Mike Westhoff and all the other Saints guys that quietly Sean Payton will assemble on his roster of coaches, I'm sure.
It feels written in the stars, but it's interesting because like this whole time since Sean left New Orleans, it feels like the Saints have just kind of tried to like follow the book of Sean. Like, what would Sean do?
Yeah.
Who would he have? What would he call? And this feels like the first big departure from that. I totally understand why, because of the way the offense underperformed, but it does make me wonder what direction they try to go in. You're hearing rumors about John Gruden that Mickey Loomis did not really want to address in his press conference at the end of the season. I just, yeah, like I said, I wonder where it goes. I wonder how vastly they kind of departure from that Sean Payton tree way of doing things, however you want to classify it.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Ireland interviewed for the Chargers job today. He was a big Sean Payton lieutenant. The GM is still Mickey Loomis, who I believe is the longest tenured GM in football right now. I think that would make sense. And you still have a lot of those core guys in that team. Now, look, when you're a veteran team, like I think the Saints are, when you're talking about Derek Carr and Cam Jordan and Demario Davis and Alvin Kamara, these are veteran guys, and you miss the playoffs in a field of a wide open NFC, and there's 7 teams that make it, and you miss it for the second straight year. It's not shocking to me that Dennis Allen's back, but like, all right, we're gonna run it back again. Let's go. And if that's the case, like, okay, that I don't know if that's the best course for any team, but sounds like Dennis Allen's coming back. Their car's coming back, and it doesn't sound like Jordan and Davis and those guys need to retire anytime soon. Hell, they brought Jimmy Graham back this year, so they're not the youngest team in the league. Their salary cap is not ideal, but it sounds like they like what they have in house.
You've just a team that just has quietly, steadily done the same thing for the better part of 20 years. And for the most part, it's worked. But again, like the further you get away from the glow of Sean Payton's tenure, which I'm guessing Saints fans would probably tell you that glow is long gone. But
Yes.
the further you get from that, I just wonder. And yeah, like I think they can get away with it this year. They did finish with a winning record, et cetera.
Sure.
You can't get away from Derek Carr anyway. But I wonder how long until they have to be more bold than that strategy, which you typically associate with a team that's in the playoffs year after year after year, and that's just not the case with the Saints recently.
No, and if anything, I respect the loyalty to their people. That like that's that building that building's us against the world always. They always feel like they're being slighted by either the league or the rest of the fans or in the league, and it's always that city. It's New Orleans versus everybody. So they're sticking with their guys, but Saints fans they're looking maybe over the shoulder and saying what else is out there, but that's not going to be the case.
Finish it up with this, which Jason Kelce did take to his podcast that he and Travis do to say, he hasn't made a decision on his retirement. Obviously, the reports are out there. I'm totally on board with letting him make the announcement himself. I don't have to retire him, but I'm just curious, for as long as you've done this, do you have a Jason Kelce story? He's one of those players where it seems like everybody that's been in this league long enough has a good one about him.
Yeah, look, he's a great quote. He's a sweetheart. I'm going to go as recent as a couple months ago. They recorded a Christmas album during the season, their second straight Christmas album. And Connor Barwin, who's a former player and was former with the Eagles and now is in the Eagles front office, kind of was the point person on putting it all together. And what I loved was talk to Connor about it. I'm like, how'd it go? And he's like, it was the middle of the summer, and I get a call from Jason Kelce saying, you know what? I think I just wrote a Christmas carol on my own. And Connor was like, you what? It's the middle of the summer. Like it's like, what are you talking about? He's like, yeah, look, here's the story behind it. It's kind of like, Santa's got it pretty tough. He's got to go to all these different houses. He can't really sit back and enjoy Christmas himself. Santa's always working. He's on the road during Christmas. Like, and I kind of feel that as a football player during the holidays that, it's the same kind of thing. I've got young kids and I just got to provide and got to earn and got to do my job so everyone else can enjoy their holidays. And I'm going to be performing on Christmas this year. It's like, I kind of want to write a Christmas carol about Santa's night and what Santa has. And Connor's like, okay, like, you want to write it? He's like, yeah, I kind of got the lyrics too. And I'm like, and Connor's like, okay, like, all right. He's like, and how about the music? He's like, I kind of have an idea for how it's going to go. And like Jason Kelce came in and laid down a track. And I want to say it was with the guys from the War on Drugs. They were the producers of it and they put it together. And that's a rock band from Philly. And they put together a beautiful Christmas song, and it was like written by Jason Kelce, performed by Jason Kelce. And to me, that's one of those deals where it's like when you're in the league long enough and you've got enough interest out of football, like you kind of showcase those skills at some point. And to me, the fact it wasn't very highly publicized that he penned and wrote and performed his own Christmas carol, like an original. Uh, Pretty different guy, Jason Kelce, and a guy who's got interests outside of just smashing his head into other football players.
I've heard the first album. Like, I know he can sing. I didn't know he wrote that. And I sure as hell didn't know he worked with the War on Drugs, which is incredible. Well, I mean, I listen to their stuff when I write all the time.
I think it's called Santa's Night. And I could be wrong on that, but I think it's called Santa's Night. And he wrote it.
It's all, I mean, the dude's a 6-time first team All Pro. And if this is it, and honestly, if he decides he wants to run it back, I would get that too. But if this is it, like the dude could go into half a dozen different careers. I wouldn't be surprised if he's joining us in the media ranks.
Oh, either. That'll happen. You're a reporter at heart. Where do you stand on longtime veteran player and then reporters, whether it be Adam Schefter or Mike Garafolo, being the ones to say, hey, he told his teammates he's hanging it up, as opposed to player getting his own Instagram post, like injuries, free agency, even God forbid I say this, even, players and ex-players passing, I understand, but like the retirement thing, where do you stand on that? Because Brady, we went through the whole thing with Jeff Darlington and Adam Schefter. We went through it there as well. Like, where do you stand journalistically on letting the player be the one to announce it or to have a press conference, etc.?
Shoot, I mean, journalistically, I can think of my crusty old professors who would say, like, the news is the news, and it's not your job to worry about that. But like, and there are so many blurred lines these days. Like, personally, and I mean, I went to journalism school. I've been doing this for more than 10 years, but like, I don't think it's necessary in this specific instance. Like, if it's a trade, if it's an arrest, if it's
all that, I get it.
You got to do what you got to do. But like this really, I mean, sure. Does it have an impact on the organization? Does it have an impact on the league? Of course it does. But like, is it going to change a whole lot if it comes from Jason Kelce 10 days from now instead of Adam Schefter that night? I don't think so. And so like, I can't really get mad at the reporter.
Yeah, you can't get no one's mad at Schefter, but I also think from the player standpoint, it's probably like,
I mean, and especially, for a longtime legend like Kelce or like Tom Brady, where your retirement is going to be headline news, then I mean, let the guy do it. If it's a lot of times, lesser players will like tell Schefter, like, hey, I'm retiring. And, maybe that way you can drum up a little more notoriety for it.
There was a safety, Mike Adams, who is from Paterson, New Jersey, played in the league for like the Colts for many, many years, would come on Good Morning Football time to time. And then out of nowhere, one day I get like a direct message from him and he's like, I'm thinking I'm going to hang him up. Do you want to report it? I'm like, yeah, I'll report it. Like, it's like,
totally,
but it's like, it comes from the player. Look, again, Garafolo and Schefter, they're in a different world than us, and every scoop matters. So I'm not going to say they did anything wrong here, but it's just interesting that the guy goes on his podcast the next day and he's like, I'm not sure it's official yet. And you're like, well, is it or is it not? And here we go.
But I also, and I remember it was either last year or the year before that, like, because Kelce's one of those guys that retirement rumors have been following him for like 3 or 4 years now. And he had a year where in like February, he recorded a video of him like shotgunning a beer and was like, I'm back, baby, or something like, and like, maybe in mid-February when his body's in less pain, he'll be more on board. So I get that maybe he doesn't have an answer right now. I do, based on the way he was crying on Monday night, I do think he's probably retiring, but that's for him to decide.
And I don't know anything about anything. I really don't. But I think the second he does step away, his podcast is still number one. His brother is still dating Taylor Swift. He's still going to have all sorts of commercials. And to your point, whether it's Amazon or CBS or Fox throws him in their number 2 or number 3 booth, whatever it is, or on a studio show, I think there's a job waiting for Jason Kelce. And that's pretty rare for an offensive lineman to have a line of suitors for his business.
Can you... Like, it's such an incredible glow up, right? Like, Jason and Travis were both headed to the Hall of Fame before they even got the idea to do a podcast, before they ever played in a Super Bowl, before Travis ever talked to Taylor Swift. And yet they still glue up this past like 18 months by a solid 1,000%. Like it's unbelievable how big they already were and how much bigger they are now.
There was a great meme, and it was, or maybe it was a tweet. It was a Taylor Swift fan, and she said, I didn't even know who this person was 3 months ago, and I'm crying over the mic'd up of Jason Kelce just because I love him because of his podcast with Travis. I'm like, it's too funny. It's great.
And
household name.
There's a natural tendency to like get tired of people that are in the spotlight for that long, but I don't feel that way about either Kelce.
I'm not fatigued by either one of them either. I think that's real. And sometimes with people that we know, it's a little bit much. It's like, all right, I could do without, I unfollow or I mute on social media. I don't do that with these guys.
No. Bring it on, Jason. If you want to play, cool. If you want to do something else, I will be there to watch that too. All right, cool. We'll see how well this coaching conversation ages, hopefully a little bit better than it did last week. Peter, as always, I appreciate the time, man. I'll check in with you soon.
You're the best, dude. Thank you.
Thanks as always to Peter, and thanks again to our next interview. As I promised, had a chance to talk to Bears cornerback Jaylon Johnson about his all-pro season, about where things stand with his contract negotiations with the Chicago Bears, where that's going, not to mention the choice that awaits the Bears this offseason. Do you stick with Justin Fields? Do you pursue a quarterback in the NFL draft? Got into all of that and a little bit more. Check it out. All right, we don't get a lot of in-studio guests on the show. It's a lot of Zoom calls, so it's nice to have somebody here in person. And on top of that, it's an all-pro cornerback, Jaylon Johnson. For starters, how's that feel? How's that phrase feel, all-pro?
I'm still adjusting to that, honestly. I mean, it sounds pretty dang good, honestly. I mean, the Pro Bowl, that one sounded good for a little bit. People call me Pro Bowl Jay, but now the all-pro Jay, that sounds pretty good.
So I love it when this happens for a younger player. Like, let's be real. Cornerback, you spend so much time off the TV screen.
Right, no
like
doubt.
if you're not getting a ton of picks, and you have 4, it's not like you didn't have any, but if you're not getting a ton of picks, sometimes that can go unrecognized. Right. So how much does it mean to you that in a position where it can be hard to break in, people saw what you did this year?
Honestly, it means a lot because, I mean, like you said, honestly, just keeping your head down and just working, I think, too, it's not entertaining for people to see somebody stopping somebody from catching touchdowns or catching the passes. I mean, you kind of always root for the offense. I mean, kind of being that guy that people recognize and see the actual skill and talent and the hard work that's been put in definitely feels good to do it. I think also, too, just being able to be consistent throughout my career in my coverage, being consistent and really not being the guy that you see being on the wrong side of the highlights. So, I mean, just taking all that in and just getting the recognition and respect from my peers amongst the league and just my coaches, the facility, everybody in the building, just really knowing and recognizing my hard work. I think all that goes and feels really good.
That's a stat I know, I assume cornerbacks keep track of that. Mm-hmm. Like, you keep track of the list of guys that catch touchdowns on you, and how much does that fuel you to stay off a Sports Center?
I mean, it's kind of what goes on. Even if it's not your fault, if you're the closest defender to the touchdown, most people are going to say it's your fault. But, I mean, I know for me, it's definitely something that motivates me is like guys just aren't going to have their highlight days on the times that I'm guarding them or the games that I'm going to be matched up against them. So just really going in and just trying to limit as much production as I can. I mean, I have a hard time just letting anybody catch the ball itself. So better yet, a touchdown.
So let's talk about this Bears defense in general. I know y'all didn't make the playoffs. I get that's the ultimate goal, but it's easy to forget about what y'all went through this year.
Right, no doubt.
Lose your DC like basically at the start of the season. Rough start. Right. 1-5, 27 points per game allowed. And then the second half of the season, y'all just completely turned it on. 17 points per game allowed. Go on a little winning streak. Mm-hmm. Montez Sweat shows up. Tyreek Stevenson on the other side of the secondary. Like, what do you attribute to that turnaround? And what was the key to y'all moving past the way the season started?
Honestly, I think just the leaders just keeping everybody on the boat. I think a lot of times in situations like that, people want to start jumping off the boat. But I think really just keeping our heads down. And then, too, I think we weren't a healthy defense. We had a lot of injuries. Eddie Jackson was hurt early. Kyler Gordon was hurt early. And then, of course, coming in, you mentioned Tariq, him coming in, being a young corner, a rookie corner. It's a lot to develop. It's a lot to kind of try to keep together. But I think we got healthy and we stood together. And I think, of course, Adam Montez Sweat definitely helped and gave us a lot more feel and kind of sparked us, gave us something new. And I think really just everybody coming together and just really taking pride. And we knew we had a talented group on defense, but we weren't able to put it together. So honestly, just putting our foot down and just staying together and just honestly just going out there and trying to dominate best we can on that back half of the year.
How rewarding is it when like the work that you're doing starts paying off? You know, like I just can't imagine it's easy to grind when the losses are piling up like that. Like how rewarding is it to kind of feel it flip?
I would say definitely very rewarding. I think that's why you work hard. I think it's just to increase your chances of success. And I think too, I mean, hard work doesn't guarantee you anything, but I know if you don't work hard, the chances of you getting it aren't really in your favor. So I think just for us, just continue to work hard, continue to stay committed to the process, stay committed to growing with each other, loving each other. And then, I mean, as we were able to see in that back half of the season, we were able to be special.
All right, I can't bury the lead anymore. Obviously,
let's talk about it.
You timed an all-pro season incredibly well as your rookie contract comes to an end. The quote from Bears GM Ryan Poles is, "Jaylon's not going to go anywhere, and we'll work through it to get something done." This has got to be kind of a weird time for you, right? I mean, what do you make of that quote? And as you wait here to see what's coming here between now and March, what does it mean to hear him say that? What do you think about how this next couple months is going to play out with the Bears and potentially with everybody else?
Honestly, I mean, it's a new statement for everybody else. It's not new for me. I mean, we've been in contact. We've been talking and kind of knowing what direction we want to go in. And I think really it's just now a waiting game for us to get on the same page to really engage in talks and to make it happen. But I definitely know where he stands with me, and he knows where I stand with the organization and what I want and the value and all those type of things. I mean, we've been very honest and transparent through the process, so it's now really just a matter of time.
I loved how open and honest you were back around the trade deadline. Like your name came up. Obviously, It was hotly discussed. You mentioned that maybe you were even surprised that you didn't wind up getting moved. And you also kind of talked about, look, Ryan's got a job to do. I value myself as well. Like I get that there's two sides of this. I guess, has it changed over that course of time where, you know, whatever's to come or whenever this gets done, there's an understanding of the business side of this? Like, how has your appreciation for that kind of grown here over the last year or so?
I think you really don't get a true appreciation until you're the one in it. And I think throughout this year, I've been the one in it versus people that tell, oh yeah, business is a business. But until you're actually in the fire, you don't really know how it feels. But I think for me, just being able to learn and grow and mature in the business side of the NFL, I think it's something I've been able to truly appreciate. But I think too, I mean, nothing changes. The more you understand, in a sense, the more knowledge, the more you're able to prepare yourself. So I feel like I've been very prepared for my team. They prepared me going into the season of different outcomes, different things that may or may not happen, and then just kind of you have a feel. I think too, going through beginning of the year and then through the trade deadline and going around there, kind of just different things. But again, nothing's ever guaranteed. But I think now, just throughout this process, just waiting really to see. I mean, I'm not really rushing and pressing anything. I mean, what will come will come.
Does it, going back to what Ryan said, like does a public show of support, given what happened during the season and everything, does that count for you, or is it more of like a actions speak louder than words type of thing?
Definitely actions speak louder than words. I mean, I feel like the way you show your top player that you value them, I feel like it's to pay them. And I think too, I mean, it's definitely a step in the right direction to publicly acknowledge that. But I think at the end of that, the ultimate gesture is the contract, I would say. All
right, the other hot button issue we got to talk about. It's a weird situation for the Chicago Bears right now.
Right.
I'm not going to press you too hard on what they should do, because you've been there for Justin Fields' entire career. I guess for starters there, what can you say about how he turned it around in the second half of this year and coming back from that injury? What did you see from him with all that noise and all that conversation, the way that he finished the season?
I think him just trying to get comfortable, him just being who he is. I think too, you have a lot of people telling you to do this, to try to do that, or be a certain way, or, well, he doesn't throw the ball, he doesn't do all these different things. And I feel like it's always been a game, I think, for him of what he doesn't do. And I think really in the back half, he kind of just let all that go and kind of just was comfortable, was confident in just who he is as a quarterback, what he can do. And I think we were able to see that. And I think that was the biggest thing that I've always said is the talent is there. I think it's just more so his comfort in the offense, comfort in the team, and having to trust the team, the guys around him, and then also just going out there and being who he is, whether that's throwing the ball for 300 yards or running the ball for 150.
I really don't think it's fair to like ask you what the Bears should do. Like that's Ryan Poles' job to figure out. But what at the very least, what do you think is the vibe in the locker room and in that organization, knowing like, hey, we've had Justin here. It could be a number 1 overall pick later this spring. Like, what do you think is the feeling amongst the team about where this might go or what might happen?
Honestly, I think a lot of it would feel the kind of way I feel like if he wasn't here with us next year. I think because, I mean, you build so much. I feel like with somebody, you work so hard with somebody, and then I feel like it's one of those things too where it's like we don't feel like he's the problem. And I think if, in a sense, you get rid of a guy that I think has been the leader since he's gotten the building, he's took the city of Chicago on his shoulders, and I feel like that's not an easy city to take on, especially when you're not winning. So, I mean, just the way he's been able to handle himself as a man in the locker room. I mean, even for me, building a relationship with him as well. He's supported my golf tournament nonprofit thing. So, I mean, he's a guy that has good character, a guy that I feel like everybody draws close to. So, I feel like you getting rid of him, I feel like especially what he can do on the field, we're able to see the talent that he has. So, I think, I mean, for us, I think it'll be a hard reset for us to be able to, take on a new leader, somebody coming in running the show now. So, I mean, I think he's the one personally.
Said it yourself. You said it yourself.
No doubt.
No, there just aren't many more interesting situations happening in the NFL heading into this offseason than what's going to happen in Chicago. Plenty of time to talk about that, but while you're here, you might as well get some scouting expertise. There are 2 NFC North teams still playing in the playoffs. Yeah. I'm sure that, I assume that stings a little bit, but you got, particularly for the Detroit Lions, y'all played those guys tough.
No doubt.
What do you think about that Lions offense? What I guess, what's your scouting report for them heading into the divisional round of the playoffs?
I'm giving other teams a scouting report?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it really starts with the 2-headed monster and David Montgomery, and then the Gibbs, the rookie. I think they're 2 very good backs, 2 very different backs, I think, too. And then I think it really starts with them. I think the offense goes through the running game, the screen game, getting them the ball, trying to get them the ball in space. And then also, too, I feel like where they tear teams up are really, I think, play action passes and throwing the ball in the middle of the field. I think that's kind of Goff's sweet spot. I think you see a lot of Amon-Ra's passes are always being caught across the middle, running across the route. So I think if you can stop the run game and force them to throw the ball kind of like outside the numbers, I think that's where you'll have a lot of success with them.
Last one. I think it's especially interesting. Y'all got Jordan Love in week 1.
Fact.
Then you got him again at the very end of the season. Like, you played a whole season in between seeing this guy. What do you make of his growth over the course of the season? What do you make of, you've watched a lot of him on tape, I'm sure, just his growth and what you see from him as a young quarterback?
Honestly, it's crazy to say, but he's looked the exact same to week 1 when we played on.
Really?
Versus, because I mean, shoot, we got a very good Jordan Love. It's not like we didn't get the struggle of Jordan Love. We got the best version of him. But I think really just throughout the year, you kind of got to find yourself. I think this is his first year to really have opportunities week after week, from week 1, like you said, to week 18 or week 17 of going through playing different defenses and things like that. I mean, he's watched us for a minute, considering how many times we played him and just at least watching film. But I think really just him playing within his frame. I feel like when he plays within himself, when he makes the easy read, the easy passes, and makes the smart decision, I think that's when he has the most success. And then, of course, you start seeing a few mistakes when you try to force a few things or if it's a little unrattled. So I think really just the confidence and poise, and then really just taking what defenses give him. I think he does a really good job at that, and I feel like that can be unappreciated at times.
We'll see what happens, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this plays out for you, man. But personally, looking forward to seeing a lot more battles between you and your guys against Jordan Love.
Yeah, no doubt.
Young secondary in Chicago, young receiver core in Green Bay. It sounds like a hell of a lot of fun to me.
No, I'm looking forward to it.
Man, I hope everything that's coming with your contract, I hope you get everything you deserve. I really appreciate you stopping by, man. It was fun.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
That does it for today's show, but we'll be back Friday. We still have to preview the divisional round of the playoffs, obviously. Texans, Ravens, Packers, 49ers on Saturday. Then Sunday, you've got Buccaneers, Lions, and we wrap the whole thing up with Chiefs, Bills, the Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes showdown. Who's not excited? Let's go. Can't wait. Going to talk to Greg Olson about Packers 49ers. We'll have a preview for every game for you. Whatever pops off in the meantime, it's that time of year where something probably will. We'll have you covered on any hirings, firings, personnel changes, you name it. It'll all be right here. If you haven't already, I'll say it one more time. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to get your podcasts. If you're a YouTube person, we have a channel for that too. Please, please give us those precious views, those precious clicks and downloads that help us do this whole thing. You know where to find it. You know where we'll be. We'll be here all the way up to the Super Bowl, and we will be back Friday to preview the best weekend on the sports calendar, divisional weekend. Can't wait. Can't wait to talk to you again soon. We'll catch y'all next time.